From beautiful East Tennessee in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, you are listening to the Sherry Voluntary Show, and I do appreciate you spending your time with me today. I, I have something really interesting for you guys, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. It's a little bit different than the stuff I normally cover, but I think you're really going to be have great interest in maybe applying this to your lives. So I have with me Hex and Brandon from Greyman Design, and they are an agorist collective. So welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for bringing us on.
Thanks. So now, Hex, you are a print designer, correct?
Yes. No.
Yeah, and then Brandon, you are the social media manager and the cryptocurrency advisor. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So first, let's just talk a little bit about how you guys got together, how you started the collective. You know, what brought you to want to have a business that was agorist in nature?
For me, I originally started this with another friend whose name was Jacob. And I don't think that's going to be too much info since I didn't give his last name or whatnot. I started getting interested in agorism after I had just kind of felt distraught by the current set of politics. And I didn't quite feel that I was making headway with the Libertarian Party. I understand that there's people for whom that works very well, but I didn't feel that that was really what I needed to do. And so I realized that my talents would probably be better distinctly in what I knew that I could do very well, which was design work, because I've been working in the design industry for quite a number of years, basically since I was legally allowed to. And so I thought, well, if I can figure out a way to put that to work in a non-political way, then I think that I will do really well. And so I had a friend who was agorist. And agorism is essentially revolutionary market anarchism that rather than using electoral style to get to our desired society, the desired stateless free market society, we distinctly use the market itself, specifically the counter economy, which is the gray and black markets. And because I already had a friend who was doing that, I figured that might be the best way for me to go. He was already involved with cryptocurrency. He was already involved with that general sort of thing. And so I asked my friend Jacob, and I said, hey, I know that there is kind of a bit of a lack of really solid design work in the agorist community. A lot of people in the agorist community are really interested in self-sufficiency, and as such, they can do a lot of things themselves. And so most people, when they were doing their logos, when they were doing their work and their websites, they were basically just doing it themselves. And it's not to bust on anybody's ability for that kind of thing, but they didn't have the best possible, most professional looking work that I'd seen. And so I was like, well, I can come in and I can do a little bit of work for them for a little bit of money. And we can make a really good business here. And my basic premise of it when creating Greyman Design along with Jacob, our idea was, well, if we're going to be representing anarchism, we got to look the part. We got to look as good as we speak. And so that was the basic premise of Greyman Design. It started with just Jacob and me. And then eventually we realized that we couldn't really do this very well, just the two of us. And so we started bringing in more people. And as we were doing that, we thought, well, incorporated in some of agorist theory, like in the later agorist theory, was the idea that if central planning isn't so great in the public sphere, can decentralized private. And that was how we came about the idea of the non-democratic cooperative that is Greyman Design.
I think your mic, just a second, Hex, I think your mic got a little covered or something. It's a little bit muted. Did it move? Yeah. I can't hear you now.
Really?
I can't. Yeah. Say something else.
Is it working now?
Now I can hear you. Yeah. I don't know, for a second there that moved and then I couldn't hear you. So go right ahead.
Where'd it cut me off?
Um, that you started with your friend Jacob, and we're bringing in design. Can't remember the last thing that it was you said about getting more people involved. That was it.
Sure. After that, um, we we kind of came to the conclusion that, well, in some of Agorist theory was the idea that if decentralization is good for the public sector, if people are able to govern themselves in a decentralized manner, how could we do that in the private sector? And so we were thinking about a more decentralized organization style, and through that came the style for Greyman design,
Mhm.
which you
Great.
mentioned earlier. We call it two different things on occasion. The one that we've kind of settled on was a non-democratic cooperative as of right
Okay. Great. And so, Brandon, how did you come to get involved with this Greyman design and come to like an understanding of agorism? I mean, that's something I had never heard until I was deep into libertarian philosophy. And you guys are, I'm assuming, younger than I am. So,
now.
it's interesting to me whenever someone comes to these things very young. So, how did you get involved?
Yeah, he had contacted me through a chat, and yeah, I was really interested, just because, um, you know, uh, I don't want to, you know, as agorists, we don't want to perpetuate um, what the state is doing, um, in terms of what they're doing overseas,
Right.
drone bombing, uh, what they're doing with their own currency, inflation, printing. So if we can get away from those things, um, you know, the, definitely the better.
Right. So,
So
yeah.
that's what really attracted me to um, this company and agorism.
Great. Yeah, I know that, basically money is the lifeblood of the state, and that's, it perpetuates the war machine. And so if you can kind of, I see agorism as basically the only real alternative to actually fight state power,
Mhm.
besides taking up arms, which probably wouldn't work out that well for any of us.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not for a bloody revolution unless it's absolutely cannot be avoided. So I think agorism is the best way to actually, uh, chip away at state power and their influence in our lives, and like you said, become more self-sufficient. I know a lot of people who would consider themselves agorists are also like off the grid, and they're
Mhm.
doing a lot of stuff. I admire agorism. I'll say I'm an admirer. I am not, I mean, I avoid, I use different markets when I can, but I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm an agorist quite yet. I don't think I can claim that title. But I definitely admire it, and, hope to do more in that way. So, how many people are involved with your business?
It's about 9, I think, right? That's what we have officially in the Slack group.
Mhm.
Brandon?
Yeah,
9?
yeah,
Yeah.
about 9.
Yeah,
And so,
it's
are
too
you
to
guys are
get
spread
people.
out all over, correct? You're not like in one central location, like a business that would be a brick and mortar and
No,
in one area.
no. We've got people all over the U.S., and we've actually got some people who are outside of the U.S. as well who are involved with this.
Mhm. So, what are sort of some of the benefits that you see of doing a business in this way? And some of the, on the flip side, the sort of, I mean, of course, you are fighting the state, and that's not providing them with their, what they would consider their resources. So I'm sure that's a big concern. But what are some of the benefits and the pros and cons of doing a business in this way?
I would definitely say that in terms of agorism, I enjoy it. One part of because of the reasons that we talked about earlier, in which we are avoiding taxes when doing this. Um, we are using cryptocurrency and silver only in all of our dealings. And by doing this, you are at least partially helping other people to do the same when you're buying some of our products. And in the same way, we are providing a service that other people be more viewed, look more professional when they're doing what they're trying to do. The benefits to this, I would say, it's just to apply libertarian theory into your own life, because for a lot of people it is theory, and they discuss things over Facebook and they argue about who is the more libertarian, who's the true libertarian.
No.
Well, I think it's best to agorist. We're not really much for theory. If you believe something heavily, we think you should try and do that. So I believed personally before coming into this that decentralized planning was a really good idea in the private sector. And so it's like, okay, let's do that. Let's not try and argue about that over Facebook. Let's do that in real time. Let's see what happens. It just allows you to live in a more free manner in general. I am still working. In some ways, I am perfectly fitting within what's considered agorism, in that I'm using counter-economics for the pursuit of a free market. In some ways, I'm not perfectly. Take for granted how heavily involved the state is in each of our transactions. We say, well, the private sector is the free sector, but not entirely, certainly, because of all the regulations and all of the involvement that's in there. And there are even private people who are involving themselves in the state. We have these large corporate businesses that are helping with the regulation, that are actually involving themselves in how the regulations are done. They're involving themselves with giving these giant subsidies and grants and moving things in a way that benefits them, specifically through the state. We are so far from that. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought while I was going.
That's okay. It happens.
The benefits.
I think some of what you're
Sorry.
saying is some of the arguments had back and forth between, say, anarcho-capitalists and other more left libertarians, in that, capitalism is sort of, it's an unfortunate word, I would say, because really what we're talking about is free markets. Mm-hmm. And capitalism doesn't necessarily mean free markets. And most people who own a business are not actually capitalists in some sense of the word. So mm-hmm. I understand that there's a lot of discussion to be had in kind of parsing out what is what and what people mean. But I know that Samuel Konkin, who came up with the agorist philosophy, as far as I know, he said he was more Rothbardian than Rothbard. Like, he was just taking it to its natural conclusion that this is the way to really fight state power, state transgression in our lives. So I understand there's a lot of semantic arguments around it, but really what his philosophy, as far as, like I said, I understand, it was that agorism is a way for many people of many different flavors, if you will, of libertarianism to actually have that unity of fighting the state, which is what we want, right? That's what we want to do. So I don't know if you can say any more, but I'm sure you know much more about it than I do. I'm just kind of still learning about agorism.
When you come into agorism, you really have to toss away a lot of the sacred ideas of any different belief systems. We actually had an NCOM come into our group who is doing really great. I tend to have, I definitely started out with more mutualist leanings, but when you come in, you really see for the first time your ideas in action. There's a lot of different people from different ideas coming in. We've got some people who mm-hmm. are former syndicalists in the movement. We have people who were more mutualists coming in. We have ANCAPs coming in, and they're finally seeing their ideas in action, but they're also seeing that everything kind of feeds off of each other. Mm-hmm. One thing that fits exactly to how their planned system is. I think that if you really want to see what a stateless society is, you got to look into agorist markets. You got to see like what people are doing now, and that's a good idea of what's coming later.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That it would be the actual proving ground, the market that we all sort of look to do a lot in anarchism. That that would be the proving ground of the ideas and what works and what doesn't. And of course, I think we probably could all agree that there are going to be, if we were to ever actually have some sort of anarchist society, if you will, that there would be different competing governments or governances. And so not everyone would have to live under the same type of system. But for me, I know, voluntarism is the foundation for all of that, I don't believe in force or coercion against the individual. So
Absolutely.
you can organize however you want on top of that. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that, with the market, you're meeting the needs of people, and people have different needs. And so different governance is also going to be needed, which it makes complete logical sense to me. So, Brandon, as far as the cryptocurrency, I know I'm slightly invested in some crypto, and I wouldn't say I really understand its workings and all the great things about it. But how is crypto such a key part of what you guys want to do in working in the gray markets and black markets, and how does crypto fit in with all that?
Yeah, it really goes to kind of what you said earlier. You're not using their form of value. Their monopolized version of currency or fiat. It really goes to kind of, it's an easier way to transact with people without all of the, rules and regulations. A lot of the cryptocurrencies are making it harder to trace, so that's really going to help our gray and black markets as well. And to kind of add to what you said earlier, a lot of the agorists are voluntarists. So, I mean, if I'd rather do business with a statist or a voluntarist, I'm going to pick the voluntarist every single time because they have more morals of what we're looking for. They're usually more moral than your average statist.
I would hope so.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really, it's something that I think is important to anyone who comes to an understanding of, voluntarism, anarchism, agorism, whatever, is that it's based on the individual and the fact that there's a new morality. And sometimes I think people, when I talk with people who aren't familiar with the terms that and the way we use them, they think when I say it's immoral that I'm talking about a religious type of morality. And really it's not. It's the morality of the individual being, this sort of sanctified individual where they have all the rights that they should, and it's unjust to ever transgress against those rights when it's not, called for, if they're not aggressing against you. So I think that's something that most people could, in our flavor of libertarianism, that could agree with that. And something you said earlier, Hex, that interested me was that, you said people are coming in from all these different areas, and that your views have sort of changed. And I feel sort of the same way. Like we're all on a spectrum. I'm an anarchist, and that's not going to change. But I'm learning more about different things all the time, and so agorism, I think, to some people has a bad connotation because they think it's like communism or something. I've talked to some people, maybe they just are completely, it doesn't seem to be a very widespread thing, but some people think it's like, I don't know, because it's kind of under the umbrella of left libertarianism because of the founder, Konkin, was he said he was left of Rothbard, which, granted, that's not very hard to do, to be left of Rothbard. So,
I think
you know,
everybody thinks that.
yeah, you know, I mean, and even Rothbard changed over time. I think we all change over time, and so to delve into like something like agorism, or to at least address or look into the what other people are saying, like with the term capitalism. Like I still use the term because I know to most people outside of, you know, libertarianism, they're not thinking about capitalism in the way that, say, you would think about it or I would think about it. But it's technical terms like that sort of, we kind of rub each other the wrong way with sometimes. And it's good to like look at the other viewpoint and see what they're actually saying. Because I think a lot of times we just sort of talk past each other when we're really not disagreeing that much. So as far as agorism goes with that, how would you describe the applications that it can have in everyone's life? Like, what, you don't have to be considered on the left to be an agorist, correct?
Certainly, you know. Now, Agorism, he considered himself left because of how like intense he was about decentralization, to the point where later he described himself as anti-capitalist. And the reason why I think can be understood by ANCAPs. The reason why he described, because of state capitalists using that term to describe how they operated, how they used the government to enforce property titles that in no way resembled libertarian ideas of property, and how they would just devour markets in a way that is just so against the non-aggression principle, so against libertarian ideas. And because of that, he couldn't feel that he could call himself a capitalist. Now, as for the question, I think that everybody can apply it in their own lives in some way. I've talked with anarcho-communists, and I've talked with anarcho-capitalists. How I describe it to the ANCAPs is that they want to see a world free of regulation in their marketplace. And so I say, well, the most unregulated place is the black market, is the gray market. And to the anarcho-communists who are disturbed by all these things that they consider based upon state privilege, and I say, well, the place that's least based upon state privilege is the gray and black markets. And what kind of appealed to them, and why we're having syndicalists coming into the movement now, is because there's actually a lot of regulations involved with cooperatives and that sort of thing. It's really hard to make a business that doesn't officially have like a one person who's presiding over it. And so they're like, okay, that's definitely an easier way, and I'm not having to pay taxes to fund wars and the bombing of brown people all over the world. You know? So,
Right.
And for just the regular person who just wants to be living a more free life, there is a person, I forget his name, it's going to bug me now, on YouTube, who started a channel because he wrote a book called, I was so excited to say it now. It's
Derek Bros, maybe?
What, sorry?
Derek Bros with the Contrast Resistance Network? Him, maybe?
It was Derek Bros. And his book was about how to live free of the system, essentially. And so that's just things that even regular people can apply to their lives. It's food freedom. No longer are they having to go to like grocery stores and such that are heavily regulated. Now they're in their own homes or just outside their own homes on their lawns and such that don't have any. So we have mutualists who consider themselves free market anti-capitalists, and they're able to pursue directly the ideas of having decentralized organization, but also free market. Colors, and even people outside of anarchism can pretty easily apply a lot of these things to their lives, and they don't have to start right off by paying no taxes in their life whatsoever. It can be
Right.
small things like buying like a bottle of honey or something from somebody without paying taxes or something like that, or starting a garden in your yard without having to worry about like if the city has permits for that.
Right.
It starts off small, and you just work into it eventually over time.
Yeah. I think that's for me, it's just trying to incorporate as many things as I can into my life that avoid the state completely.
Mhm.
And so I'm all for that. But so Brandon, what would you say are some of the ways that you would encourage people if they are interested in starting, you know, to be more agorist in their life? What are some of the ways maybe you implement agorism in your life besides just your business?
I'd say cryptocurrency definitely. And the great thing about that is, no, if you're holding your own private keys with cryptocurrency, nobody's going to be able to take that away from you. Not even governments. And so when governments come at you, they'll basically coerce your bank, and your bank's going to let them do whatever they want, freeze your accounts or take your money. And cryptocurrency is definitely a great way to get around that, or to transact with people without, with minimal, if any detection
Mm.
whatsoever.
Yeah. So we all know about Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road and all that. Is that something that you guys are concerned about from your side about being invaded by state thugs and taken over and all of those bad things? Like, is that something that you are concerned about, or is it a minor concern?
I think because right now we're kind of in a position where we're not really doing something that's super illegal. Like we're not selling drugs or anything. We're just selling designs. It's not illegal to sell designs. It's not illegal to accept crypto. The only thing that technically would be considered illegal is not paying taxes on it. I I think especially as different things like agorist defense groups and such come in, that's going to be a little bit less of an issue. I think for a lot of people, it's just important to be using more secure lines of communication, things like Signal
Mhm.
and Telegram and that sort of thing. Um, I mean, I admittedly, I do have a lot of concern about it, and that's why I do things like that. That's why I make sure that um, I'm not doing um, super crazy stuff like giving a whole ton of details over Facebook and that sort of thing.
Right.
Why I use the name Hex in um, my discussions with people, because you can probably guess that a parent's not going to name their kid Hex or things like that. Unless they're like really like boho kind of people. But it's looking for things that keep you a little bit more covert, while just generally being smart about how you do things. It's best not to come out, run out into the middle of the street saying, "Hey, this is an untaxed service. Please buy."
Right.
Or like that guy who ran into the coffee shop going, "Anybody want a cup of coffee?" It's probably not really smart to do things like that. As long as you're being more covert about things and not doing anything too broad or out in the open, then I think you're fine. Like we're doing things that are a little bit less illegal. Some people that we're selling to do things that are a little bit more illegal.
Sure.
But as long as you're being smart about private communication, as long as you're being smart about things that aren't too overtly dangerous, then you can typically not have the feds crack down on you for stuff.
Yeah, it's a sad state when freedom isn't free. Like,
Yeah,
so many people
very
would
much.
the land of the free is not a free place, and you cannot. I know in I believe it's in my hometown of Chattanooga. I'm not sure if they actually got it passed, but I know they wanted to start having people have permits for yard sales as a way to get some money off of people reselling their things, and there's nothing that the state doesn't think it deserves from you. Like, it believes it owns you. Nobody really owns anything, any property in this country, and yet most people walk around thinking that we are the most free people in the world. And so I think I really respect what you guys are doing, and I look to, like I said, grow my own involvement in agorism, my own understanding of it as well. And so, as we sort of wrap up everything here today, where can people find you? And do you have any recommendations for people who, want to read up on it or whatever?
Sure. They can find us on our site, which is just greymandesign.com for now. There's no real worry about it being a site because it sends it to a secure email. So it shouldn't be very easily tracked, the things that they're sending us. If they're really concerned about it, they can send us some info through greymandesign@protonmail.com. And that is definitely the most secure way of getting info to us, discussing stuff with us. To find more information on Agorism, just head over to agorism.info. It's spelled AGORISM.info, and that just has a whole bunch of recommendations. It has a bunch of free books or places to buy books on Kindle, PDFs, videos, audio, got all kinds of good. Going to be the best way that they can find things outside of just
Great.
talking with people on Facebook who can themselves agorists.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck and a lot of success in everything that you're doing. So that's it for us this week, guys. You can catch other great shows on Little L Productions, such as Postcards from Somalia. There's also Godarchy with Mike Meharry and Sports Ball with Mike and Alan. And of course, there is The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And until next time, peace.